This is a game that heading in, there were a lot of question marks about Michigan's status as a top 5 team. They played a really soft non-conference. Maryland, Iowa, Indiana, those are definitely not the best teams of the Big Ten. So people questioned the Wolverines' status as a top 5 team. But destroying Penn State the way they did has gone a long way in proving what the Wolverines are and just gave them some national respect as being a true contender this season in college football. I'm going to talk about how the game went for them. I'm going to talk about what it means for Michigan and Penn State. But you look at a few statistics from this game, things that really show why there was this disparity between the two teams. Because, again, both top 10 teams, Michigan at 5, Penn State at 10, very similarly recruited in terms of talent on their rosters. James Franklin's been at Penn State for a while. Jim Harbaugh's been in Michigan for a while. But you look at how this game played out. It was 16-14 at the end of the first half. But if you watched the game, you knew that Michigan should have had a much larger lead than that. Really key statistics from this is A, time of possession. 41 minutes, almost 42 minutes of possession for the Wolverines compared to 18 for Penn State. That is insane to see that large a disparity in time of possession. And that doesn't always matter, right? Sometimes time of possession doesn't mean anything for how a game played out. But when you then compound that with the fact that Michigan had 28 first downs to just 10 for Penn State, I believe in the first half, Penn State had a lone first down on offense. Michigan dominated this game from beginning to finish, and that time of possession and first down number is a pretty good indicator of how this game went. Because despite the fact that it was close at the end of the first half, it was close because of 2 wacky plays. One being the Sean Clifford 62-yard run, came out of nowhere. Everyone thought he handed the ball off on a 3rd and 2 to the running back. Next thing you know, he takes off down the field and gets on the goal line. The other being a tipped ball that turned into a pick 6 for Penn State. So now you have 14 points for Penn State, even though Michigan's dominated the first half. But settling for field goals hurt the Wolverines and allowed Penn State to be at one point up 14-13, and then the late field goal in the first half put Michigan up 16-14. The other thing, though, and I just mentioned it a little bit, is Sean Clifford. He had the 62-yard run, but outside of that, he only had 12 rushing yards outside of that big carry in the first half, and he was 7 for 19 for 120 yards passing over the course of the game. He was inefficient. He had a few big throws, nice catches by his receivers to help move the chains and keep Penn State in the game, especially in the first half. But ultimately, yes, he's very experienced. That's something that was talked about heading into the game, was that Sean Clifford has a lot of experience because he's like a 47-year-old man in college football. I think he's currently in his 5th year at Penn State, but not a high upside player. And the Michigan defensive line terrorized Sean Clifford over the course of the game, resulting in 2 sacks and 5 quarterback hurries. His ability to maneuver around the pocket saved him a few times, but the Michigan defensive line made things really uncomfortable for Sean Clifford. And then, of course, finally, this is the more obvious one, but when you run for over 400 rushing yards against a team, you're probably going to win. And Michigan had 418 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns between Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum. Just an absolutely dominant rushing performance for Michigan. I couldn't believe how easily they were able to run the football against a team like Penn State that's recruited at a similar level to Michigan. James Franklin knows that in the Big Ten, you live and die on the ground, in the trenches. And it was very reminiscent for me of the 2019 game against a top 10 Notre Dame for the Wolverines, where they ran for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns on Notre Dame. This is the offense that Jim Harbaugh wants to operate. Blake Corum touched the ball 28 times, had himself sort of a Heisman moment, right? He's the best running back in college football right now. He deserves to be in the Heisman conversation when you consider that, A, he's statistically producing at a level greater than that of the last couple Heisman running backs that we've seen in college football. And for another thing, an average of about 10 carries a game in their non-conference, because he didn't need to touch the ball after that. So Blake Corum is efficient. He's fun to watch. He is an incredible running back. And he's probably not going to win the Heisman. I don't think that people are vouching and saying he should be the Heisman favorite. Okay, that's where a lot of people get caught up. I'm not saying he's a Heisman favorite, but he needs to be in the conversation. That is the point with Blake Corum. And Michigan could have a Heisman finalist 2 years in a row, with Aiden Hutchinson last year and potentially Blake Corum this year as well. But back to the game, Michigan did what they've kind of done all season, which is kill you in the second half. At the end of the first half against Maryland, Iowa, Indiana, and Penn State, it was 17-13, 13-0, 10-10, and 14-16. That ended up being a 34-27 win against Maryland, where a garbage time touchdown closed it up a little bit. A 27-14 finish to the Iowa game, where, again, a garbage time touchdown closed that a little bit. A 31-10 smashing of Indiana in the second half, and then a 41-17 smashing of Penn State in the second half. So Michigan in the second half has been an incredible team, and part of that is because that defensive line and offensive line that Michigan has leans on you, wears you out. They're able to rotate guys in and out of the defensive line because they have so many quality players in their front seven. Then the second half, it becomes too much, and they have the best offensive line in the country, and they just start to lean on you. And over the course of the game, it's a lot harder to stop that run game. And then when Blake Corum's wore out because he touched the ball 20 times, they put Donovan Edwards in. And if you don't know, Donovan Edwards was a top 50 player coming out of high school from West Bloomfield, Michigan. He's now a sophomore. Ultimately, this is two programs who recruit at a similar level, but Michigan is a well-oiled machine in the Big Ten, competing with the big boys, and we're finally at a point in Jim Harbaugh's tenure where Michigan is one of the best in the country again. I'm not saying that they can beat Georgia or beat Alabama or beat Tennessee this year. Well, I don't even know if they can beat Ohio State, but they're in that conversation. Like talking about Blake Corum with the Heisman, right? They're in that conversation again for being at the top of college football, and that's why they're a top 5 team right now. And as of today, I believe they're 4th in the AP poll. They have the best offensive line in the country. They have the best running back room in the country, I would argue, with Donovan Edwards coming into form as a sophomore now, Blake Corum as a Heisman candidate. And Michigan had the best offensive line in the country last year. And their offensive line is probably better this year. And you could say the same thing with their defensive line. They had an incredible duo of Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo last season coming off the edge. They've now gone to this formula of rotating in 4 or 5 pass rushers along the defensive line over the course of the game, using stints, sending pressure off the edge. Mike Sainristil still as a nickelback. They're able to do a lot of different things to create pressure. They're more creative with blitzes. They get more creative as the season goes along with their play calling. And moving forward, Michigan's going to be a favorite against everybody they play up until Ohio State. Now, yes, you still have to respect that game against Michigan State, even though Michigan State's not very good. Illinois is a top 25 team right now, but Michigan gets that game at home before playing Ohio State. But they're going to be a favorite in their next 4 games. In all likelihood, we're going to get an undefeated Michigan and an undefeated Ohio State at the end of the season. At worst, either of those two teams could have 1 loss. And you still have a battle of top 5 teams, potentially top 3 teams going at it. First ranked Ohio State, third ranked Michigan, second ranked Ohio State, fourth ranked Michigan, something along those lines. That's going to be an incredible game in Columbus, Ohio. Can Michigan win that game? I think it's hard to say. I don't want to move too quickly yet talking about Ohio State because there's still 4 games to be played. But obviously Michigan's path to the playoff and a Big Ten title goes through going down to Columbus, Ohio and playing Ohio State. And like I said earlier, Michigan is a well-oiled machine. This is how Harbaugh wants to play ball. He wants to have an aggressive front seven. He wants to have a great offensive line. He wants to run the football. And what's different about this year's team to last year's team, other than, as I said, how they get to the quarterback, the improved offensive line, J.J. McCarthy is now a playmaker for them at quarterback, which is just something they didn't really have last year. Now, with that said, J.J. hasn't taken over a game for them, and I am concerned about if he can or will this season. He still looks a little green. He still looks like his decision-making is in need of improvement. Hasn't really found the deep ball yet, passing. You can tell that he's trying to not rely on running the ball. That's a clear point of emphasis for them, but it's something that he can do so well that if they find that balance, he's going to be dangerous. But he's very accurate. He's completing over 75% of his passes. He's a phenomenal quarterback and a great talent, but he hasn't had to win them a game. I think that when it comes to Ohio State at the end of the season, they might need him to do that. But as of 7 weeks into the season, the best he's had to do is really take over in the second half of the Indiana game and pull Michigan ahead there. I just get worried about the prospects of Ohio State, or even before that, Illinois, Michigan State, finding a way to shut down the Michigan run game, keeping their quarterback clean in the pocket, and you get a gunfight between Michigan and X team, and JD's going to have to carry them. And I just wonder if he can do that. I know that the talent is there, but is the passing game developed enough for him to take over and win the game? We'll see. But as of right now, I enjoy watching this Michigan team even more than last year's Michigan team. This is an incredible team to watch. But as for Penn State, I want to finish up talking about them. Penn State is still a solid team and a young team. They get Minnesota at home. I think they're going to win that game. They got to play Ohio State, go on the road to a couple of interesting places like Indiana, Rutgers. Overall, they could still be a 10-win team and have a much better season than I thought they were going to have heading into the year. I thought they were around an 8 or 9-win team at best. They're already looking like they can at least hit 8 wins, if not 9 or 10. And again, they're very young. I know Sean Clifford's 50, but they've got 2 freshmen at running back that they love to use. Parker Washington at wide receiver should be coming back next year. They've got young linebackers. I think that Penn State is moving in the right direction. That's why they gave James Franklin a big contract. This was a disappointing loss for Penn State, one that historically Penn State doesn't win. They don't go on the road and beat top 5, even top 10 teams. But Penn State is still a solid team in college football and in the Big Ten. I still think that they're probably the 3rd best team in the Big Ten East as of right now as well. So I'm not pushing the big red button on Penn State. I know what the last couple of years have been for them. Their program was kind of in disarray, but they're okay. I think that this speaks more to just how good Michigan is than, say, how poorly Penn State played. But with that said, thank you for listening, everybody. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps me to grow my channel. Keep an eye on moving forward for more college football content. The playoff is spicing up right now and what that's going to look like. Michigan is playing their best football of the season. I like to put out college football and Michigan football content. So if you're a fan of either, again, please like and subscribe. And go blue.